The autumn rain drummed against the windows of the Silver Moonpack's community center, creating a rhythmic backdrop to what should have been the happiest night of Maya Chen's life. Instead, she stood frozen in the middle of the crowded hall, her heart hammering against her ribs as Alpha Kieran Blackwood's words echoed in the sudden silence. I, Kieran Blackwood, Alpha of the Silver Moonpack, reject you, Maya Chen, as my mate. The formal rejection ceremony was a rare occurrence, reserved for the most serious of circumstances. Maya had never imagined she would be the subject of one. Around them, pack members whispered behind their hands, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and curiosity. The scent of her humiliation seemed to permeate the air, mixing with the pine and cedar that naturally clung to everyone's clothing from their forest home. Maya's wolf whimpered inside her, a sound of pure anguish that only she could hear. The mate bond, which had been a warm, golden thread connecting her to Kieran for the past month since they'd discovered their connection, now felt like a burning wire being slowly severed. Kieran stood tall and imposing in his black suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, his green eyes cold as winter stone. At 28, he was everything an alpha should be: strong, decisive, commanding, and utterly out of her league, as he was now making abundantly clear. "You're a good person, Maya," he continued, his voice carrying easily through the hall, "but you're ordinary, a pack nurse. I need a Lunar who can stand beside me as an equal, someone with strength, with presence, with a bloodline that commands respect." Maya felt the words like physical blows. Ordinary. The label she'd fought against her entire life, now thrown at her by the one person whose opinion mattered most. She was 25 years old, had put herself through nursing school, had saved countless pack members' lives in the medical center, but none of that mattered now. "I accept your rejection," she whispered, the formal response barely audible. But werewolf hearing meant everyone heard it anyway. The golden thread snapped completely, and Maya gasped as the severing of the mate bond sent waves of pain through her entire body. She stumbled, and her best friend Sarah rushed forward to steady her. "Maya, are you—" "I'm fine," Maya lied, straightening her shoulders. She looked directly at Kieran, surprised by the brief flash of something that might have been regret in his eyes before his expression hardened again. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Alpha," she said with as much dignity as she could muster. Then she turned and walked out of the hall, her head held high, despite the whispers following in her wake. The October night air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp with the promise of winter. Maya wrapped her arms around herself and walked quickly toward her small cottage on the outskirts of the pack territory. The rain had turned to a light mist, creating halos around the streetlights that lined the path through the forest. Behind her she could hear the sounds of the gathering resuming, life moving on as if her heart hadn't just been torn apart in front of everyone she'd ever known. By tomorrow there would be speculation about who Kieran would choose instead. Someone worthy, someone with the right bloodline, someone who wasn't ordinary Maya Chen. Chapter 2. The Decision. Maya didn't sleep that night. She sat by her window, watching the mist roll through the towering Douglas firs that surrounded her cottage, her tea growing cold in her hands as she replayed every moment of her humiliation. The silence in her mind, where Kieran's presence used to whisper, was deafening. By dawn she had made her decision. Sarah arrived just as Maya was loading the last of her boxes into her beaten-up Honda Civic. Her friend's face was streaked with tears, her blonde hair disheveled, as if she'd run the entire way from her house. "Maya, please don't do this," Sarah begged, grabbing her arm. "So what if Kieran's an idiot? This is your home. These people love you." "Do they?" Maya asked quietly, closing the trunk with more force than necessary. "Because last night I didn't see a single person stand up for me. I saw a lot of pitying looks and whispered gossip, but no one thought the alpha might be wrong." Sarah's face crumpled. "I wanted to say something. I did. But challenging an alpha publicly, you know what that could mean for my family?" Maya softened, pulling her friend into a hug. "I know, and I'm not angry at you, Sarah, but I can't stay here and pretend everything's normal. I can't work alongside people who think I'm not good enough, who'll always see me as the girl who got rejected. Where will you go?" "Seattle. I've got some money saved, and there's a human hospital there that's been trying to recruit me." Maya had always been gifted with healing, her patients recovering faster under her care than seemed entirely natural. She'd assumed it was just skill and dedication, but perhaps there was something more to it. "What about your parents?" Maya's jaw tightened. Her adoptive parents had died in a car accident 3 years ago, and she'd never known her biological family. "I don't have anyone keeping me here anymore." The words hung heavy between them. Sarah knew that Kieran had been Maya's hope for finally belonging somewhere completely, for having a family again. His rejection hadn't just broken her heart, it had shattered her sense of home. They were interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the gravel path. Maya looked up to see Beta Marcus approaching, his usually kind face grave with concern. At 45, Marcus had always been like an uncle to her, one of the few pack members who'd treated her as more than just the adopted human girl who turned out to be a wolf. "Maya," he said carefully, "the Alpha wants to see you before you leave." "Tell the Alpha I have nothing more to say to him," Maya replied, opening her car door. "Please." Marcus's voice held genuine distress. I think he's having second thoughts. He was up all night pacing his office. The pack's already talking about how wrong this feels." Maya paused, her hand on the door handle. For just a moment, hope fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. Then she remembered the cold certainty in Kieran's voice, the way he'd looked at her like she was beneath him. "If he's having second thoughts, he should have had them before he humiliated me in front of the entire pack," she said firmly. "I won't be his backup plan, Marcus. I won't be the mate he settles for when he realizes his perfect Lunar doesn't exist." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I've known Kieran since he was a boy. His father was demanding, always pushing him to be stronger, better, more than what he was. I think sometimes Kieran confuses what his father wanted with what he actually needs. That's not my problem to fix," Maya said, though her voice gentled slightly. She'd always suspected that Alpha Theron Blackwood's expectations had shaped his son in ways that weren't entirely healthy. She hugged Marcus goodbye, then Sarah one more time. "I'll call when I get settled," she promised, sliding into her car. As she drove down the winding forest road that led away from Silver Moon territory, Maya caught a glimpse of a tall figure standing on the balcony of the pack house. Even at this distance, she could recognize Kieran's silhouette. For a moment, their eyes seemed to meet across the space, and she felt an echo of the severed bond, like phantom pain from a missing limb. Then she rounded the curve, and he was gone. Maya Chen was leaving the only home she'd ever known, heading toward an uncertain future in a city where no one knew her story. She had no idea that her departure would set in motion events that would shake the entire werewolf world, or that the ordinary bloodline Kieran had dismissed ran deeper and more powerful than anyone had ever imagined. Behind her, the morning mist swirled through the forest like a living thing, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled in loss. Chapter 3. New Beginnings. 3 months later, Maya had almost convinced herself she was happy. Seattle General Hospital's emergency department was a chaotic symphony of beeping monitors, rushing footsteps, and urgent voices that never seemed to stop. Maya thrived in the controlled chaos, her supernatural healing abilities allowing her to work longer shifts than her human colleagues without showing fatigue. She'd rented a small studio apartment in Capitol Hill, far enough from any werewolf territories that she could blend seamlessly into human society. "Maya, we've got a multi-car accident coming in," called Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the head of emergency medicine. "ETA 5 minutes. You're with me on the critical cases." Maya nodded, pulling her dark hair back into a tight ponytail and checking her equipment. In the 3 months since she'd started at Seattle General, she'd earned a reputation as the nurse who could somehow help the most hopeless cases pull through. Her colleagues attributed it to skill and intuition, never suspecting that her werewolf healing abilities extended to helping others recover faster. The ambulance doors burst open, and the familiar rush of emergency medicine took over. Maya worked alongside the trauma team, her hands steady as she assisted with a young woman who'd suffered massive internal bleeding. As she worked, she felt the familiar warm tingle in her palms, her gift reaching out, encouraging the patient's body to heal itself. "That's incredible," Dr. Walsh murmured, as they watched the patient's vitals stabilize far faster than anyone had expected. "You have a gift, Maya. I've never seen anything like it." If only she knew, Maya thought wryly. After her shift ended at midnight, Maya walked through the quiet Seattle streets toward her apartment. The December air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of the nearby Puget Sound. She'd grown to love the city's energy, so different from the quiet forest community she'd left behind. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Pack meeting tonight. Kieran announced his engagement to Victoria Ashworth. Thought you should know, I'm sorry." Maya stopped walking, staring at the message as snow began to fall in lazy flakes around her. Victoria Ashworth, the daughter of the Alpha from the neighboring Moonridge pack, beautiful and poised with a bloodline that traced back to the original werewolf councils. Everything Kieran had said he needed in a Lunar. She waited for the stab of pain, the crushing sensation she'd expected. Instead, she felt nothing. Perhaps time had finally begun to heal the wounds after all. She was about to delete the message when another text came through, this one from an unknown number. Maya Chen, we need to talk. Your life is in danger. Meet me at Pike Place Market tomorrow at noon. Come alone. E. Maya's blood ran cold. No one in Seattle knew her real name or her background. She'd been careful to use only her human credentials, to keep any mention of her werewolf nature completely hidden. Who could possibly know who she really was? She looked around the empty street, suddenly hyper-aware of every shadow, every doorway. Had someone been watching her? Following her? Back in her apartment, Maya double-checked all her locks and pulled the curtains tight. She sat on her small couch, staring at the mysterious message. Every instinct screamed at her not to go, to ignore it and continue her quiet human life. But the phrase, "Your life is in danger," kept echoing in her mind. If someone had found her, they could find her again. Running wouldn't solve anything. She would go to the meeting, but she wouldn't go unprepared. Chapter 4. Revelations. Pike Place Market bustled with its usual midday crowd of tourists and locals, the air filled with the calls of fishmongers and the scent of fresh flowers. Maya positioned herself near the original Starbucks, her back to the wall and multiple exit routes mapped in her mind. She'd dressed in dark jeans and a jacket that wouldn't restrict her movement, and she'd brought a silver knife blessed by the pack's former shaman, one of the few things she'd kept from her old life. At exactly noon, a woman approached her. She was perhaps 60 years old, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant bun and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see everything. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, and Maya's wolf immediately recognized her as something powerful. "Maya Chen," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight accent Maya couldn't place. "I am Elena Voss. Thank you for coming." "Who are you?" Maya asked quietly, not extending her hand. "And how do you know who I am?" Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I am what you might call a historian of our kind. I keep track of bloodlines, of births and deaths, of the patterns that shape our world." She gestured toward a quieter section of the market. "Walk with me. What I have to tell you cannot be overheard." Against her better judgment, Maya fell into step beside the older woman. Eleanor led her to a small cafe tucked away from the main thoroughfares, claiming a corner table where they could speak privately. "3 months ago, you were rejected by Alpha Kieran Blackwood of the Silver Moon Pack," Eleanor began without preamble. "You left your home and came here believing yourself to be ordinary, unremarkable." Maya's jaw tightened. "If you're here to gloat about my humiliation, on the contrary." Elena leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I'm here to tell you that Kieran Blackwood made the greatest mistake in werewolf history. You are not ordinary, Maya Chen. You are anything but." Maya laughed bitterly. "Right. That's why I grew up in foster care until the Chens adopted me. That's why I have no pack bloodline, no family connections, no—" "You have no pack bloodline because your family transcends packs," Elena interrupted. "Tell me, have you ever wondered why your healing abilities are so strong? Why patients recover faster under your care than should be possible?" Maya's denial died in her throat. She had wondered, many times. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph, sliding it across the table. "This was taken 70 years ago. Do you recognize anyone?" Maya looked down at the black and white image and gasped. It showed a young woman who could have been Maya's twin, standing beside a man in formal ceremonial robes. Behind them, a crowd of werewolves knelt in obvious reverence. "Who is this?" Maya whispered. "Your grandmother, Lunar Isabella Nightshade, the last confirmed heir to the Lunar throne." Eleanor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The most powerful werewolf bloodline in existence, thought extinct after the Great Purge of 1953. Maya's head spun. "That's impossible. I would know if I—" "Your grandmother went into hiding when the old regime fell," Elena continued. "She gave birth to your mother in secret, then disappeared completely. Your mother was raised by humans, never knowing her true heritage. She met your father, a werewolf from a minor pack, had you, and died in childbirth. Your father, not knowing what you were, gave you up for adoption. The world seemed to tilt around Maya. You're lying. Eleanor pulled out another item, a small silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon, intricate symbols carved around its edges. This belonged to your grandmother. Touch it. Maya hesitated, then reached out with trembling fingers. The moment her skin made contact with the pendant, it blazed with silver light. Power rushed through her like electricity, and for a brief moment she could sense every werewolf in the city, could feel the pull of the full moon even though it was daytime. Impossible, she breathed, jerking her hand back. The Lunar bloodline carries the power to unite all werewolf packs under one rule, Elena explained urgently. But there are those who would see that power destroyed rather than allow it to return. 3 days ago I received word that the Shadow Collective, werewolves who profit from the chaos of divided packs, have discovered you're alive. They're coming for you, Maya, and they won't stop until you're dead. Maya stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. No, I don't want this. I don't want any of this. I just want to live my life. I'm afraid that choice was taken from you the moment you were born, Elena said sadly. Your existence threatens the current power structure. The Shadow Collective has spent decades ensuring that werewolf packs remain divided and weak. A Lunar with the power to unite them all? They'll kill you before they let that happen. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We know where you are. Through the cafe window, Maya spotted 3 figures in dark clothing moving through the crowd with predatory purpose, their eyes scanning faces with inhuman intensity. We need to go, Elena said sharply, following Maya's gaze. Now. As they stood to leave, Maya caught a familiar scent on the winter air, pine and cedar, mixed with something uniquely Kieran. Her heart lurched as she realized what it meant. Somehow her former alpha had found her, but whether he'd come to protect her or claim her for political advantage, she had no way of knowing. The game, it seemed, was about to change completely. Chapter 5. Unexpected Allies. Maya and Elena slipped out the cafe's back exit just as the 3 figures in dark clothing entered through the front. The alley behind Pike Place Market was narrow and filled with delivery trucks, providing cover as they moved quickly toward the street. My car is 2 blocks away, Elena whispered urgently. We need to... A familiar voice cut through the air. Maya. She turned to see Kieran emerging from behind a food truck, flanked by Marcus and 2 other Silver Moon Pack warriors. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, commanding, devastatingly handsome, but there were new lines of stress around his green eyes, and his dark hair was longer, as if he'd been running his hands through it. What are you doing here? Maya demanded, her heart hammering against her ribs. Seeing him again brought back all the pain she'd thought she'd buried. Saving your life, apparently, Kieran replied grimly. He glanced at Elena with recognition. Ms. Voss, I should have known you'd find her first. You know each other? Maya looked between them, confusion mixing with her anger. Eleanor nodded. I contacted Alpha Blackwood 3 days ago when I learned of the threat against you. He's been searching for you ever since. Why? Maya's voice was barely a whisper. You made it very clear that I was beneath your notice. Pain flashed across Kieran's face. Maya, We don't have time for this, Marcus interrupted, pointing toward the mouth of the alley. They've found us. The 3 dark-clothed figures had indeed discovered their escape route and were approaching fast. Up close, Maya could see their eyes held an unnatural red glow. Werewolves, but something was wrong with them. Their movements were too fluid, too coordinated, like they were being controlled by a single mind. Shadow wolves, Elena hissed. They've been enhanced somehow. We can't fight them here, not with all these humans around. Kieran stepped protectively in front of Maya, his body already beginning the partial shift that would give him claws and enhanced strength. Marcus, get them to the cars, we'll hold them off. No, Maya said firmly, surprising everyone. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. She felt the pendant Elena had given her burning against her palm, where she still clutched it. Power thrummed through her veins, stronger than anything she'd ever experienced. When she looked up at Kieran, she saw his eyes widen in shock. Your eyes, he breathed. They're silver. Maya didn't have time to process what that meant. The shadow wolves were almost upon them, moving with inhuman speed. She stepped forward, and power exploded outward from her in a wave of silver light. The 3 attackers stopped as if they'd hit an invisible wall, their red eyes flickering with confusion. For a moment, The unnatural coordination left their movements, and they looked around as if waking from a dream. "What did you do?" Kieran asked in amazement. "I don't know," Maya admitted, staring at her hands. The silver light was fading, but she could still feel the power thrumming beneath her skin. "I just wanted them to stop." The moment of confusion didn't last long. The shadow wolves' eyes blazed red again, and they resumed their advance. But now they moved with obvious caution. "We need to go," Eleanor urged. "Whatever you did won't hold them for long." They ran through the maze of Seattle's downtown streets, the shadow wolves pursuing but keeping their distance. Eleanor led them to a sleek black SUV parked in an underground garage, and they all piled in as she gunned the engine. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, finally allowing herself to breathe as they merged into traffic. "Somewhere safe," Kieran replied from the passenger seat. He turned to look at her, his green eyes intense. "Maya, we need to talk. About what just happened. About why I'm really here. You mean it's not because you suddenly realized I'm not ordinary enough for you?" The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. Kieran flinched as if she'd slapped him. "I deserved that. And you're right. I was an arrogant fool. But Maya, I never said you weren't good enough for me. I said you were too good for what I thought I needed. That makes no sense." "It does when you understand that I was trying to protect you from a world I thought you weren't ready for," he said quietly. "The political games, the constant threats, the weight of leadership. I thought if I rejected you, you could have a normal life." Eleanor snorted from the driver's seat. "Men, always thinking they know what's best for everyone else." "You could have talked to me," Maya said, her voice thick with emotion. "You could have trusted me to make my own choices." "I know, and I've regretted it every single day since you left." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with 3 months of unspoken pain. Maya wanted to reach for him, to bridge the gap that his rejection had created, but she wasn't ready to trust again. Not yet. "The shadow wolves," she said instead, changing the subject. "What did Elena mean about them being enhanced?" Marcus answered from the back seat. "We've been tracking reports for months. Werewolves with red eyes, moving in perfect coordination, showing no individual will. Someone is controlling them, using them as weapons." "The Shadow Collective," Elena added grimly. "They found a way to strip werewolves of their free will, turning them into perfect soldiers, and now they want to use that army to eliminate the last heir to the Lunar throne." Maya felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. "So what you're telling me is that I'm some kind of werewolf princess with magical powers. There's an army of mind-controlled wolves trying to kill me, and the solution is—" "What exactly?" "You need to claim your birthright," Elena said simply. "Take your place as the Lunar Supreme and unite the packs under your rule. It's the only way to stop the collective." "And if I don't want to rule anyone?" Kieran turned to meet her eyes, and she saw something in his gaze that she'd never seen before, complete faith in her strength. "Then a lot of good wolves are going to die," he said honestly, "including everyone you care about." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the pendant's weight in her palm. When she'd left Silver Moon Pack 3 months ago, all she'd wanted was a quiet life where she could help people and heal from her heartbreak. Now it seemed the entire werewolf world was depending on her to become something she'd never imagined she could be. Chapter 6. Sanctuary and Secrets. Eleanor drove them to an estate hidden deep in the Cascade Mountains, 2 hours east of Seattle. The sprawling lodge was surrounded by towering evergreens and protected by wards that made Maya's skin tingle as they passed through them. It was clearly a safe house, designed specifically for supernatural beings. "Welcome to Moonhaven," Eleanor said as they pulled up to the main building. "This place has served as neutral ground for werewolf negotiations for over a century. The wards will keep the shadow wolves out, at least temporarily." Inside, the lodge was warm and welcoming, decorated with rich wood and comfortable furnishings. But Maya barely noticed the decor. She was too focused on the other occupants. At least a dozen werewolves from different packs filled the common areas, their scents mixing in a complex tapestry that spoke of old alliances and careful neutrality. Maya Chen, an elderly man, approached them, his grey beard neatly trimmed and his eyes kind but sharp. "I am Elder Thomas Whitewing of the Pacific Council. We've been waiting for you." "How many people know about this?" Maya asked, suddenly feeling overwhelmed. "How many people knew who I was while I was living my normal life in Seattle?" "Very few," Thomas assured her. "Elena contacted only the most trusted members of the council when she discovered your identity 3 months ago. We've been watching you from a distance, ensuring your safety. Then you did a terrible job, Maya said bluntly, because the Shadow Collective found me anyway. A woman about Maya's age stepped forward, her auburn hair catching the firelight. That's because someone leaked your location, she said, her voice carrying a slight Scottish accent. Someone in this room is a traitor. The atmosphere in the lodge immediately grew tense. Hands moved instinctively toward weapons, and Maya could smell the spike of adrenaline and suspicion in the air. That's a serious accusation, Fiona, Elder Thomas said carefully. It's the only explanation, Fiona replied, not backing down. The Shadow Wolves knew exactly where to find Maya, exactly when she would be at Pike Place Market. That information wasn't public. Kieran moved protectively closer to Maya. Who are you? Fiona MacLeod, beta of the Highland Pack and Elena's goddaughter, she replied, her green eyes flashing. And before you ask, Alpha Blackwood, I have no love for the Shadow Collective. They killed my parents 5 years ago. Maya felt another wave of unreality wash over her. How many people have died because of this bloodline I supposedly carry? Too many, Elena said sadly. The Shadow Collective has been systematically eliminating anyone who might challenge their control over the werewolf world. They've assassinated pack leaders, destroyed ancient bloodlines and turned wolf against wolf to maintain the chaos that serves their purposes. And they think I can stop them? Not think. No, Thomas corrected. The Lunar bloodline carries more than just political significance. Your ancestors had the ability to break mental compulsions, to free wolves from outside control. That's why the collective fears you above all others. Maya thought about what had happened in the alley, the way the Shadow Wolves had stopped when silver light poured from her hands. That's what I did to those wolves today. I broke whatever was controlling them. Temporarily, Elena nodded. But with training, with the full awakening of your powers, you could free them permanently. You could build an army of wolves who choose to follow you rather than being forced to serve. I don't want an army, Maya said firmly. I've never wanted to hurt anyone. Kieran surprised her by speaking up. The best leaders are often the ones who don't seek power, he said quietly. Maya, I've seen you in action. You've saved more lives in your 3 months as a human nurse than most pack leaders save in years. You have the heart of a true Lunar. The compliment sent warmth through her chest, but Maya pushed the feeling aside. She couldn't let her confused feelings for Kieran cloud her judgment about something this important. If I am who you say I am, she said slowly, if I do have these powers, then I need to understand what I'm really capable of. Not just for the people counting on me, but so I can make an informed choice about what comes next. Elena smiled for the first time since they'd met. Spoken like a true leader, your training begins tomorrow at dawn. As the group dispersed for the evening, Kieran lingered near Maya. Can we talk? Privately? She nodded and he led her out onto a wooden deck that overlooked the moonlit forest. The December air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of snow and pine. I owe you an explanation, Kieran began, leaning against the railing, about why I really rejected you. I thought you already explained that. I told you part of it, but there's more. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture she remembered from their time together. 2 weeks before our mate bond manifested, I received a threat. Someone sent me photos of you at work, at your apartment, going about your daily life. The message said that if I claimed you as my Lunar, you would die within a month. Maya stared at him in shock. You never told me about any threat, because I thought if I rejected you publicly, dramatically, it would convince whoever was threatening you that you were no longer important to me. I thought I could protect you by making you hate me. The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. So all of that, calling me ordinary, rejecting me in front of the entire pack, that was supposed to save my life. It was the stupidest plan in the history of stupid plans, Kieran admitted, his voice rough with self-recrimination. I should have talked to you, should have trusted you with the truth. Instead, I broke both our hearts and sent you right into the path of the very danger I was trying to protect you from. Maya felt tears burning her eyes. Do you have any idea what these past 3 months have been like? Thinking that I wasn't good enough? That I was just some consolation prize you couldn't bring yourself to accept? I'm sorry, he whispered, and she could see the genuine anguish in his green eyes. I'm so sorry, Maya. I would give anything to undo the pain I caused you. She turned away from him, looking out at the forest while she tried to process everything. The mate bond between them had been severed, but she could still feel the ghost of what they'd once shared, could still remember what it had felt like to be loved by him, even if that love had been expressed in the most destructive way possible. "I understand why you did it," she said finally, "but understanding and forgiving are two different things." Kieran nodded, accepting her words without argument. "I know, and I know I have no right to ask for another chance. But Maya, whatever happens next, whatever you decide about your birthright and your future, I want you to know that I will stand with you. Not as your mate, I lost that right, but as your ally, as someone who believes in the leader you're meant to become." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. This was the Kieran she'd fallen in love with. Not the arrogant alpha who'd rejected her, but the man who cared so deeply about protecting others that he'd sacrifice his own happiness. "We should get some sleep," she said instead of responding to his declaration. "Tomorrow is going to change everything." As she headed inside, Kieran called after her softly, "Maya, for what it's worth, I never thought you were ordinary. Not for a single moment." She paused in the doorway, not turning around. "Good night, Kieran." But as she climbed the stairs to her assigned room, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that despite everything that had gone wrong between them, Kieran Blackwood might still be the key to the future she was being asked to embrace. Chapter 7. Awakening Power. Maya woke before dawn to the sound of wolves howling in the distance, a haunting chorus that seemed to call directly to her soul. She dressed quickly in the training clothes Elena had provided and made her way downstairs, where she found the older woman waiting with steaming cups of coffee. "Ready to discover what you're truly capable of?" Elena asked, her blue eyes bright with anticipation. "As ready as someone can be to find out they're a werewolf princess, I suppose," Maya replied dryly. Elena led her outside to a circular clearing behind the lodge, where ancient symbols had been carved into standing stones. The morning mist clung to the ground like ghostly fingers, and Maya could feel power humming in the air around the sacred space. "Your grandmother stood in this very circle 70 years ago," Elena said softly. "She was the last Lunar to be properly trained in the old ways, before the Great Purge scattered our kind and nearly destroyed our most sacred traditions." "What happened during the Great Purge?" Elena's expression darkened. Her group of power-hungry alphas decided that the Lunar bloodline was too dangerous to exist. They believed that werewolves should be ruled by strength alone, not by the mystical authority of an ancient bloodline. They systematically hunted down every known member of the Nightshade family. But my grandmother survived. Barely. She was pregnant with your mother when the attacks began. She went into hiding, gave birth in secret, and spent the rest of her life ensuring that the bloodline would continue, even if it meant sacrificing her own position and power. Maya stepped into the circle and immediately felt energy racing up from the earth through the soles of her feet. She gave up everything to protect her family, as did your mother in her own way. She could have sought out the werewolf world, could have claimed her heritage. Instead, she chose to live as a human, to give you the chance at a normal life. Elena moved to stand opposite Maya in the circle. "Now place your hand on the center stone and let's see what your bloodline has awakened." Maya approached the waist-high stone pillar in the center of the circle. The moment her palm touched its surface, silver light exploded around them. But this time, instead of the brief flash she'd experienced at Pike Place Market, the power kept building, flowing through her in waves that seemed to come from the earth itself. "Breathe through it," Elena instructed, her voice somehow reaching Maya despite the roaring energy. "Don't fight the power, guide it." Maya closed her eyes and tried to center herself, the way she did during particularly difficult emergency procedures at the hospital. Gradually, she became aware that the power wasn't random. It had a purpose, a direction. She could sense every werewolf for miles around, could feel their individual spirits like flames in the darkness. But more than that, she could sense places where those flames flickered weakly, unnaturally. The shadow wolves were out there, their minds clouded by whatever force controlled them, and Maya could feel their pain like physical wounds. "They're suffering," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The controlled ones. They're trapped inside their own minds, screaming to be free. Can you reach them?" Maya extended her consciousness toward the nearest group of shadow wolves, perhaps a mile away through the forest. She could feel their confusion, their desperate fight against the compulsion that drove them. Carefully, gently, she touched her power to their minds. The silver light pulsed, and suddenly Maya was seeing through their eyes, feeling their terror and rage. Someone, something, had carved symbols into their minds, binding their will with chains of dark magic that burned like acid. "I can break the chains," Maya said with growing confidence, "but there are so many of them, and whoever is controlling them will know the moment I free them. Then we'd better be ready for a fight, said a familiar voice. Maya opened her eyes to find Kieran approaching the circle, along with Marcus, Fiona, and several other werewolves she didn't recognize. They were all armed and alert, clearly prepared for battle. How long was I? Maya began, then noticed the position of the sun. Hours had passed while she'd been connected to the stone. 3 hours, Elena said, but you maintained the connection the entire time. I've never seen power like this, Maya. Your grandmother would be proud. Kieran stepped to the edge of the circle, his green eyes intense. Maya, I know you don't trust me right now, and I understand why, but I'm asking you to let me and my warriors stand with you when you free those wolves. Whatever's controlling them won't give up easily. Maya looked at him, seeing not the arrogant alpha who'd rejected her, but the protector who'd spent his life keeping others safe. Despite everything between them, she knew she could count on him in battle. All right, she said, but we do this my way. I won't have anyone's death on my conscience. Understood. Maya placed both hands on the stone and let her power expand outward, seeking every shadow wolf within a 50-mile radius. She found dozens of them, werewolves from different packs, all bound by the same dark magic that turned them into mindless soldiers. I'm going to break their chains, she announced to the assembled group. The moment I do, their controller is going to know exactly where we are. Be ready. She reached out with silver light, touching each imprisoned mind with the gentleness she'd learned as a healer. One by one, the magical chains shattered, and she felt the moment when each werewolf reclaimed their free will. But the backlash nearly knocked her to her knees. Somewhere in the forest, something roared in rage, a sound that was definitely not werewolf. Whatever had been controlling the shadow wolves was ancient and powerful, and Maya had just challenged its authority directly. They're coming, she gasped, still connected to the stone. Not just the freed wolves, something else. Something that's been sleeping for a very long time. The temperature around the lodge dropped 10 degrees in seconds, and Maya could hear the sound of trees crashing in the distance as something massive moved through the forest toward them. What have we awakened? Elder Thomas asked, his weathered face pale with concern. Maya met Kieran's eyes across the circle, seeing her own fear reflected in his expression. I don't think the Shadow Collective is just human werewolves, she said quietly. I think they've been working with something much older and much more dangerous. The howling that erupted from the forest was nothing like the wolves Maya had heard that morning. It was filled with malice and hunger, and it was getting closer by the minute. Whatever's coming, she said, stepping away from the stone, as silver light continued to pulse around her. I don't think it plans to leave any witnesses. Chapter 8. The Ancient Enemy. The thing that emerged from the forest was unlike anything Maya had ever imagined in her worst nightmares. It stood 15 feet tall, with the basic shape of a werewolf, but wrong in every detail. Its fur was midnight black, shot through with veins of sickly green light, and its eyes burned with malevolent intelligence. Most disturbing of all, Maya could see the faces of werewolves trapped within its flesh, their mouths open in silent screams. Wendigo, Elena breathed in horror. How is that possible? They were destroyed centuries ago. Not destroyed, the creature spoke, its voice a chorus of different tones, as if multiple beings were speaking at once. Hidden, waiting, growing stronger on the pain of your kind. Its burning gaze fixed on Maya, and now the little Lunar has awakened us with her pretty light. The freed shadow wolves came streaming out of the forest behind the creature, but instead of attacking the group at the lodge, they formed a defensive line. Maya realized with relief that breaking their mental chains had restored not just their free will, but their natural instinct to protect other werewolves from supernatural threats. I count at least 30 freed wolves, Kieran reported quietly, moving to stand beside Maya. But that thing... He trailed off, his face grim. The Wendigo feeds on werewolf life force, Thomas explained urgently. Every wolf it kills makes it stronger, and if the legends are true, it can possess the living and turn them into shadow wolves under its control. Maya felt power flowing through her from the sacred stones, stronger than anything she'd experienced before. Then I'll have to make sure it doesn't kill anyone, she said with more confidence than she felt. The Wendigo laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think your little light can hurt us, child? We have fed on the essence of 1,000 wolves. We are beyond your power now. Maybe, Maya replied, silver light beginning to pulse around her hands. But I'm not just any wolf. She raised her hands, and light exploded outward in a wave that made the Wendigo stagger backward. Where the silver energy touched its corrupted flesh, The creature's form wavered and became translucent. For a moment, Maya could see the individual wolves trapped within it, their faces turned toward her with desperate hope. "You're not one creature," she realized aloud. "You're made up of all the wolves you've consumed over the centuries, and they want to be free." "Silence!" the Wendigo roared, lunging toward her with claws extended. Kieran intercepted it, shifting into his full wolf form mid-leap. Even as an alpha, he was dwarfed by the creature's size, but he fought with the desperation of someone protecting the most important thing in his world. His claws raked across the Wendigo's hide, drawing black ichor that hissed and steamed where it hit the ground. Around them, the battle erupted in earnest. The freed shadow wolves fought alongside the lodge's defenders, their movements coordinated, but now driven by choice rather than compulsion. Fiona MacLeod proved to be a fierce warrior, her Highland training evident as she danced around larger opponents with deadly precision. But Maya could see they were losing. The Wendigo was too strong, too fast, and every time it struck one of the defenders, they crumpled as if their life force was being drained away. Kieran was bleeding from multiple wounds, his movements slowing as the creature's claws found their mark again and again. "There has to be another way," Maya muttered, pressing her hands against the center stone and letting her consciousness expand. She could feel the trapped souls within the Wendigo, hundreds of werewolves who had been consumed over the centuries. They were still aware, still fighting against their prison of corrupted flesh. An idea began to form, dangerous, possibly fatal, but their only chance. "Elena," Maya called out, "I need you to maintain the circle's power. Whatever happens, don't let the stones go dark." "Maya, what are you planning?" Elena's voice was sharp with concern. "Something stupid," Maya admitted, "but if it works, we might be able to save everyone." Before anyone could stop her, Maya stepped outside the protective circle and walked directly toward the Wendigo. The creature paused its attack on Kieran, its burning eyes focusing on her with predatory interest. "You want my life force?" Maya called out, silver light building around her like a second skin. "Come and take it." The Wendigo's laughter was triumphant as it abandoned its fight with Kieran and stalked toward her. Finally, the little Lunar shows some sense. "Your power will make us a god among monsters." "Maybe," Maya said, not backing away as the creature loomed over her. "But you'll have to consume me to get it, and I don't think you can handle what you'll find inside." The Wendigo's claws pierced her chest, and Maya screamed as she felt her life force being pulled out of her body. But instead of resisting the drain, she opened herself completely, letting every ounce of her power flow into the creature. Silver light poured into the Wendigo like molten metal, and the creature's triumphant expression quickly turned to confusion, then pain, then terror. "What have you done?" it howled. "I've given you exactly what you wanted," Maya gasped, even as she felt herself growing weaker. "All of my power, including the part that breaks mental compulsions and frees trapped souls." The Wendigo began to convulse as silver light spread through its corrupted form. The faces trapped within its flesh became clearer, more distinct, and Maya could hear their voices as they began to remember who they were. "No!" the Wendigo screamed. "We will not be denied. We will—" Its words were cut off as the trapped souls finally broke free. Hundreds of werewolves materialized around the clearing, not as ghosts or spirits, but as themselves in the moment before they'd been consumed. They looked around in confusion for a moment, then their eyes focused on the dissolving form of their captor with expressions of righteous fury. The Wendigo tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The freed souls surrounded it, and Maya watched as they pulled the last of the corrupting darkness from its form. What remained was revealed to be not a monster, but 3 werewolves whose forms had been twisted by dark magic. Werewolves who looked relieved to finally be free of the force that had controlled them. "It's over," one of the freed souls said, turning to Maya with gratitude shining in his transparent features. "Thank you, Lunar. We can finally rest." One by one, the souls faded into silver light that rose toward the sky like falling stars in reverse. Maya watched them go, tears streaming down her face, then collapsed as the drain of power finally caught up with her. Kieran reached her first, gathering her into his arms as she fought to stay conscious. "That was incredibly brave and incredibly stupid," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Did it work?" Maya whispered. "Look around," he said softly. Maya raised her head to see dozens of freed werewolves, some who had been shadow wolves, others who had been serving the Wendigo unwillingly, all kneeling in the clearing. Their eyes were clear, their own. and they were looking at her with expressions of awe and gratitude. "My Lunar," one of them said simply, "we pledge ourselves to your service, if you'll have us." Maya looked around at the assembled wolves, then up at Kieran's face. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "The best leaders never do," he replied, echoing his words from the night before. As the sun set over the Cascade Mountains, Maya Chen found herself surrounded by the first members of what would become the largest werewolf pack in history. She still didn't know if she was ready to lead them, but she was beginning to understand that, ready or not, the choice was no longer hers to make. The world had changed, and she had changed with it. Now all that remained was to see what they would build together. Chapter 9. The Price of Power. 3 days after the battle with the Wendigo, Maya still felt drained. She sat on the lodge's main deck, wrapped in a thick blanket and nursing her third cup of coffee, watching the freed werewolves establish their makeshift camp in the clearing below. They'd organized themselves with military precision, setting up shelters, establishing guard rotations, and creating a system for distributing food and supplies. What unsettled Maya most was how they looked at her. Every time one of them passed by the deck, they would pause and bow their heads respectfully. She was no longer just Maya Chen, the nurse from Seattle. She was the Lunar who had freed them, and they expected her to tell them what to do with their lives. "You're brooding," Fiona observed, settling into the chair beside her. The Scottish wolf had appointed herself as Maya's unofficial bodyguard, much to Kieran's irritation. "I'm thinking," Maya corrected. "There's a difference." "About what?" Maya gestured toward the camp below. "About the fact that 43 werewolves are now looking to me for leadership, and I don't have the first clue what I'm doing. 3 weeks ago, I was checking blood pressure and administering medications. Now I'm supposed to be some kind of supernatural queen." Fiona was quiet for a moment, her green eyes thoughtful. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, before the packs became isolated from each other. She said werewolves were stronger then, more unified. We had leaders who cared about more than just their own territory. And what happened to those leaders? They were killed or driven into hiding by wolves who preferred power to responsibility." Fiona's voice hardened. "The Shadow Collective didn't just appear overnight, Maya. They're the descendants of the same wolves who orchestrated the Great Purge, who decided that might makes right, and cooperation is weakness." Elena emerged from the lodge, carrying a thick folder that she set on the table between them. "Intelligence reports from our contacts across the country," she announced. "The situation is worse than we thought." Maya opened the folder and felt her heart sink. Photographs showed shadow wolves in at least 12 different states, reports of pack leaders disappearing or being found dead under suspicious circumstances, and most disturbing of all, evidence of Wendigo activity in areas that had been considered safe for decades. "How many more of those creatures are out there?" Maya asked. "We're not sure," Elena admitted. "The Wendigo we destroyed was the strongest, but there are signs of at least 3 others. And Maya..." She hesitated, then pulled out a final photograph. This was taken 2 days ago in Montana. The image showed a familiar figure in dark clothing addressing a crowd of red-eyed werewolves. Maya recognized him immediately from the security footage Eleanor had shown her back in Seattle, one of the original shadow wolves who had been hunting her. "Victor Thorne," Eleanor explained. "He's the public face of the Shadow Collective, and according to our sources, he's not happy about losing his army of controlled wolves." "What's he planning?" "A gathering. He's calling it a conclave of true alphas, essentially trying to unite every pack leader who opposes the return of the Lunar bloodline. They're meeting in 1 week at the old Blackwater Fortress in Colorado." Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "How many alphas are we talking about?" "At least 20 confirmed, possibly more. If he succeeds in turning them against you, Maya, you won't just be facing individual threats. You'll be looking at open war between werewolf factions." The weight of responsibility settled heavier on Maya's shoulders. Every choice she made now would affect not just her own life, but the lives of everyone who had chosen to follow her. The thought was terrifying. "There's something else," Elena continued reluctantly. "Victor Thorne has made it clear that he considers Alpha Blackwood a traitor for supporting you. There's a significant bounty on Kieran's head." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Kieran appeared in the doorway. He looked tired but determined, his dark hair damp from a recent shower and his shirt bearing new bandages over the wounds he'd received fighting the Wendigo. "How much of that did you hear?" Maya asked. "Enough," he replied, settling into a chair across from her. Victor Thorne has been gunning for my pack for years. This just gives him an excuse to make it official. I'm sorry, Maya said quietly. This is my fault. If I hadn't— Don't. Kieran's voice was firm. You saved dozens of lives 3 days ago, Maya. You freed wolves who had been enslaved for years, maybe decades. Don't apologize for doing the right thing. But now we're looking at a war because of it. We were already looking at a war, Elena interjected. Victor Thorne and his allies have been building toward this for years. Your awakening just forced them to show their hand sooner than they planned. Fiona leaned forward, her expression intense. So what do? We can't just sit here and wait for them to attack. Maya looked down at the intelligence reports, then out at the wolves who were counting on her to lead them safely through this crisis. An idea was forming in her mind. Risky, potentially suicidal, but possibly their best chance. We go to the conclave, she said finally. Everyone stared at her in shock. Maya, that's suicide, Kieran said bluntly. You'd be walking into a gathering of alphas who want you dead, surrounded by their warriors, with no way to escape if things go wrong. Not if we do it right, Maya replied, standing up and beginning to pace. Eleanor, how many werewolves across the country are currently being controlled by the collective? Best estimate. Eleanor consulted her notes. At least 200 that we know of, possibly more. And how many of the alphas attending this conclave do you think are there willingly versus being coerced or controlled? Elena's eyes widened as she began to understand Maya's plan. You want to free them, all of them, at once. The shadow wolves we freed here chose to fight alongside us once their minds were clear, Maya explained. What if some of these true alphas are just more sophisticated victims of the same control? What if we can turn Victor Thorne's own gathering against him? It's incredibly dangerous, Kieran warned. If you're wrong, if even half of those alphas are there by choice, you'll be vastly outnumbered with no way to retreat. Maya met his eyes, seeing the fear there, not for himself but for her. Despite everything that had happened between them, despite the broken mate bond and months of separation, he still cared about her safety above all else. I know, she said softly, but Kieran, I can't build a new future for our people by hiding in the mountains, and I can't ask others to fight a war I'm not willing to face myself. Marcus, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, stepped forward. If we're doing this, and I can't believe I'm saying this, we need to plan it carefully. Intelligence, backup plans, exit strategies. Agreed, Maya nodded. We have 1 week to prepare. Elena, I need you to gather every bit of information you can about the alphas attending this conclave. I want to know who they are, where they come from, and most importantly, any signs that they might not be acting of their own free will. She turned to Kieran. I need you to contact any alpha allies you trust. We can't go into this alone. Maya, Kieran said quietly, I have to ask, are you sure you're ready for this? What you did with the Wendigo nearly killed you. If you try to break the mental control on 200 werewolves at once. I know, Maya admitted, but I also know that if we don't stop the Shadow Collective now, more people will suffer. More wolves will be enslaved, more leaders will be assassinated, and eventually they'll find a way to destroy me anyway. She looked around at the faces of her friends and allies, seeing fear mixed with determination. I'm not asking anyone to follow me into this, but I am going with or without backup. Kieran stood and moved to stand directly in front of her. Then you're not going alone, he said simply. Whatever happens at Blackwater Fortress, we face it together. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. Despite everything between them, despite the pain and betrayal and broken trust, Kieran was still willing to risk his life for her. The mate bond might be severed, but something deeper remained. Together, she agreed. As the sun set behind the Cascade Mountains, Maya Chen found herself planning what might be the most dangerous mission in werewolf history. In 1 week, she would either free hundreds of enslaved wolves and expose the Shadow Collective's true nature, or she would die trying. Either way, the world was about to change forever. Chapter 10. The Blackwater Gambit. The old Blackwater Fortress squatted on a Colorado mountainside like a stone cancer, its walls black with age and its towers reaching toward storm clouds that seemed permanently fixed overhead. Maya crouched behind a ridge 2 miles away, studying the ancient stronghold through high-powered binoculars, while her heart hammered against her ribs. 23 alphas confirmed, Marcus reported quietly, lowering his own binoculars, plus their beta and warrior entourages. I count at least 200 werewolves total, all gathered in one place to decide my fate, Maya murmured. How thoughtful of them. The past week had been a whirlwind of preparation. Elena's intelligence network had provided detailed information about each alpha attending the conclave, and the picture that emerged was troubling. At least half of them showed signs of mental manipulation, sudden changes in behavior, uncharacteristic decisions, and most tellingly the same red flicker in their eyes that Maya had seen in the controlled shadow wolves. "Remember the plan," Kieran said, settling beside her on the ridge. "We get you inside during the opening ceremony when all the alphas are gathered in the main hall. You break whatever compulsions you can, and we extract immediately afterward. And if things go wrong, then we fight our way out and hope Elena's distraction teams can buy us enough time to escape." Maya nodded, but privately she knew there would be no retreat if her plan failed. She'd brought too many people into this already. 43 freed werewolves had insisted on coming as her guard, along with Kieran's pack warriors and several other allies Elena had managed to recruit. If Maya failed, they would all pay the price. "Signal from Elena," Fiona reported, pointing to a light flashing from another ridge. "The perimeter guards are in position. We'll go for insertion." Maya took a deep breath and closed her eyes, reaching out with her newfound abilities to sense the werewolves gathered in the fortress below. The sheer number of them was overwhelming, their individual spirits blazing like stars in her consciousness. But among them, she could sense something else, dark threads connecting many of the alphas to a central source, like puppet strings leading back to a master manipulator. Victor Thorne isn't just leading the Shadow Collective, she realized aloud. He's controlling half the alphas directly. This isn't a gathering of allies, it's a trap. "Do we abort?" Kieran asked immediately. Maya considered it for a moment, then shook her head. "No, this is actually better than we hoped. If I can sever Thorne's control over those alphas, we'll have allies inside the fortress instead of enemies. Or you'll have very confused and angry werewolves with no idea why they're suddenly in a hostile stronghold," Marcus pointed out grimly. "Only one way to find out." They moved down the mountainside under cover of darkness, using game trails and natural cover to approach the fortress walls. Elena's teams had already neutralized the outer patrols, leaving their approach route clear. Maya could feel the pendant her grandmother had worn burning against her chest, as if it sensed the approaching confrontation. The fortress's design worked in their favor. Dozens of narrow windows and ancient drainage passages provided multiple entry points for a small, determined team. Maya's group split up as planned, with most of their forces creating diversions at various points around the perimeter, while Maya, Kieran, Fiona, and 2 of Elena's best infiltrators made their way toward the main hall. They could hear voices echoing through the stone corridors as they crept through the fortress's interior. Maya caught fragments of heated debate, some alphas arguing for an immediate attack on her followers, others counseling patience and strategy. But underneath the normal emotional turbulence of any political gathering, Maya could sense the unnatural calm of those under mental compulsion. "The main hall is just ahead," whispered Jake, one of Elena's scouts. "But Maya, there's something you need to know. Victor Thorne isn't just controlling other alphas, he's got something else with him, something that doesn't feel like a werewolf." Maya felt a chill of recognition. "Another Wendigo? Smaller than the one we fought, but definitely not human. It's standing right beside Thorne on the dais." Maya closed her eyes and extended her senses more carefully. Jake was right. There was something ancient and hungry lurking in the main hall, its presence like a cold shadow among the warmer spirits of the assembled werewolves. "Change of plan," she whispered. "I need to get closer to identify what we're dealing with before I start breaking compulsions. If that thing is powering Thorne's control somehow, removing it might be the key to freeing everyone at once." Kieran grabbed her arm. "Maya, we agreed. I know what we agreed. But plans change." She met his eyes, seeing fear and frustration there. "Trust me, Kieran, please." After a moment, he nodded reluctantly. "How do you want to do this?" Maya pulled Elena's carefully forged invitation from her jacket. "The same way we planned from the beginning. I walk in the front door." 20 minutes later, Maya Chen stood at the entrance to Blackwater Fortress's main hall, her heart pounding as she listened to the herald announce her arrival. Presenting Maya Chen, calling herself Lunar, of the Nightshade bloodline, heir to the Lunar throne. The hall fell completely silent as every eye turned toward her. Maya walked down the central aisle with as much dignity as she could muster, very aware that she was surrounded by werewolves who had gathered specifically to decide whether she should live or die. Victor Thorne stood on a raised dais at the far end of the hall, a tall man with silver hair and cruel eyes that held an unnatural red gleam. Beside him stood something that might once have been human, but had been twisted into something else entirely. Gaunt and pale, with two long fingers that ended in blackened claws. "How kind of you to join us, Miss Chen," Thorne said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "We were just discussing your situation." "Were you?" Maya replied, stopping in the center of the hall. "And what conclusions have you reached?" "That your bloodline is a relic of a more primitive time," said Alpha Harrison of the Dakota Pack, his voice oddly flat. "That werewolves should be ruled by strength, not by mystical authority that no longer serves any purpose." Maya could see the red flicker in Harrison's eyes, the same telltale sign of mental compulsion, but not all the alphas showed it. Perhaps a third of them seemed genuinely hostile rather than controlled. "An interesting perspective," Maya said calmly, letting her power begin to build slowly, carefully. "Tell me, Alpha Harrison, when did you first decide that the old ways were obsolete?" Harrison frowned as if the question confused him. It's obvious that—" "That what?" Maya pressed. "Because 6 months ago, you sent a letter to the Pacific Council requesting information about the old bloodlines. You were researching ways to strengthen your pack's connection to tradition, not abandon it." Around the hall, murmurs of confusion began to rise. Several alphas looked at Harrison with surprise, clearly remembering his previous position. "Enough," Thorne snapped, and Maya felt a pulse of dark energy roll out from the creature beside him. Immediately, Harrison's expression went blank again. "Impressive," Maya said, looking directly at the twisted creature. "A wraith. I haven't seen one of those in— well, never, actually. I thought they were extinct." The creature's head turned toward her with serpentine grace. When it spoke, its voice was like wind through a graveyard. "Not extinct, little Lunar. Merely patient." Maya let her power expand further, probing the connections between the wraith and the controlled alphas. What she found made her stomach turn. The creature wasn't just controlling their minds. It was slowly draining their life force, feeding on their spiritual energy, while keeping them functional enough to serve its purposes. "You're killing them," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "The controlled alphas. You're consuming their souls bit by bit." "Lies," Thorne shouted, but Maya could see uncertainty flickering in the eyes of the uncontrolled alphas. "Alpha Martinez," Maya called out, focusing on a woman whose spirit felt particularly weak. "When did you last shift forms? When did you last feel the full moon's call?" Martinez opened her mouth to answer, then closed it with a look of growing horror. I can't remember." "Because you're dying," Maya said gently. "The wraith is killing you slowly, keeping you functional just long enough to serve its purposes, but I can free you." Silver light began to pulse around Maya as she reached out with her power, not toward the controlled alphas, but toward the wraith itself. If she could sever its connection to them all at once. "Stop her!" Thorne screamed. The uncontrolled alphas hesitated, but several of their warriors moved forward. Maya heard the sounds of fighting as Kieran and the others engaged them, but she couldn't afford to be distracted now. The wraith's shriek of rage echoed through the hall as Maya's power slammed into it. For a moment, the creature's form wavered, becoming translucent. She could see the network of dark threads connecting it to nearly half the alphas in the hall, and she began severing them one by one. Each broken connection sent feedback through the wraith, making it weaker, but it also made it desperate. The creature abandoned its position beside Thorne and lunged directly at Maya, its claws extending toward her throat. Maya caught it mid-leap with a burst of silver light that sent it crashing into the stone wall. Around the hall, the freed alphas were collapsing to their knees as their stolen life force began returning to them. What was I doing?" Alpha Harrison gasped, looking around in confusion. "Being used," Maya replied, not taking her eyes off the recovering wraith. "But that ends now." The creature pulled itself upright, its form more solid and threatening than before. "You think freeing a few puppets changes anything? There are others like me, dozens of others, and we have been preparing for your return for decades. Then you've had decades to prepare to lose." Maya shot back, silver light blazing around her like a second skin. The final confrontation was brief, but explosive. The wraith came at her with supernatural speed, but Maya was ready. She caught it again with her power, this time not trying to destroy it, but to understand it. In that moment of connection, she saw flashes of its history, how it had once been human, how the Shadow Collective had bound it with dark rituals, how it had spent 70 years building a network of controlled werewolves. And most importantly, she saw how to break those bindings permanently. Silver light exploded through the hall as Maya severed, not just the Wraith's connections to the Alphas, but the dark magic that sustained its existence. The creature's final scream echoed off the stone walls as it crumbled into dust, leaving Victor Thorne standing alone on the dais, his red eyes now simply human brown, filled with very human fear. "The Shadow Collective is finished, Victor," Maya said, approaching the dais as the freed Alphas struggled to their feet around her. "Your armies are freed, your allies are dead or fleeing, and every werewolf in this hall now knows what you really are." Thorne pulled a silver dagger from his jacket, but his hand was shaking. "You think this changes anything? You think you can just waltz in and claim dominion over all of us? I'll die before I bow to some jumped-up nurse who thinks she's a queen." "Then you'll die," said Alpha Martinez, her voice still weak, but filled with righteous fury. "Because Maya Chen isn't claiming dominion over anyone. She's offering us freedom from monsters like you." Around the hall, the other Alphas, both freed and uncontrolled, began to voice their agreement. Maya looked around at their faces, seeing not submission but gratitude, respect, and something that looked remarkably like hope. Victor Thorne raised the dagger toward his own chest, clearly intending to deny them the satisfaction of capturing him alive. But before he could strike, Kieran appeared beside him and knocked the blade from his hand. "No," Kieran said firmly. "You're going to live, Victor. You're going to stand trial before the Council, and you're going to tell us everything you know about the Shadow Collective's remaining operations." As Thorne was led away in silver chains, Maya found herself surrounded by 23 alpha werewolves, all looking to her with expressions she was still learning to interpret. "So," said Alpha Rodriguez of the Southwest Territory, "what happens now, Lunar?" Maya looked around the hall, then out through the tall windows at the dawn breaking over the Colorado mountains. "Now we go home," she said simply. "All of us. We go home, and we figure out how to build something better than what came before." It wasn't the grand proclamation of a conquering ruler or the political maneuvering of an ambitious leader. It was just a tired woman who'd fought too many battles and wanted nothing more than to help people heal. But as Maya Chen walked out of Blackwater Fortress surrounded by allies instead of enemies, she began to understand that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply offering people a choice. The war was over. The real work was just beginning.